Have you ever felt like someone you loved never really left? Like maybe, just maybe, they're still with you, in a way you can't explain? After Sarah's husband passed, the silence in their home was deafening. She couldn't sleep in their bed. She stopped watering the plants he used to care for. The world kept moving, but she couldn't. Until one cold afternoon, she walked into a shelter. No real plan, just a need to feel something again. And that's when she saw him. A dog with deep, brown eyes that looked just like her husband's when he used to say, "Everything's going to be okay." At first, she thought it was just grief playing tricks on her. But then, the dog did something that stopped her heart, something no one could explain. This isn't just a story about loss. It's about a bond that defies logic, and how love, real love, has a way of finding its way back to us, even when we think it's gone forever. They say time heals everything, but that's not how it felt for Sarah. Her world didn't just change when David died. It stopped. She woke up every morning to the sound of silence. No voice humming in the kitchen. No clinking of mugs. No footsteps walking past the bedroom door. Just stillness. His coffee cup still sat on the table, as if he'd be back any moment. And his favorite sweater, the gray one with the loose collar, was still folded over the back of his chair. She couldn't move it. She couldn't throw it in the closet. It felt like doing that would be admitting he was really gone. Sarah had friends. Good ones. They brought food at first, called her every day, checked in. But as the weeks passed, the calls came less often. Texts slowed down. Everyone had their own lives to return to. And Sarah? She just floated. She tried everything they told her to try. Therapy, journaling, long walks, volunteering at the library. Each one helped, a little. But none of them filled the space David had left behind, because it wasn't just loneliness. It was him, his absence, his voice that used to tell her everything would be okay, his laugh when she burned dinner, again, the way he used to scratch behind her ear when they curled up on the couch together, her head on his chest, the dog sprawled across their feet. They had wanted kids once. Life got busy, and then his illness came. It all happened too fast. One week they were picking out a new leash for their golden retriever, Max. The next, she was sitting alone at his funeral. She didn't cry much at first. Everyone told her she was strong, but they didn't see her on the nights she laid in their bed, clutching his pillow so hard her knuckles turned white. They didn't hear her whisper his name into the darkness, hoping, just once, he'd answer. Some nights, she wore his hoodie to sleep. It didn't smell like him anymore, not really. But memory is a strange thing. Sometimes, if she closed her eyes, she could almost feel his arms around her. Grief wasn't loud. It was quiet. It sat with her in the morning while she drank cold coffee. It followed her through the aisles of the grocery store, where she still reached for his favorite cereal without thinking. It waited for her at the door when she came home to no one. Max, their dog, had passed a year before David. Sarah used to think losing Max was the hardest thing she'd ever go through. She was wrong. Now, even the silence sounded different. It was deeper, more final. She missed the chaos, the sound of Max barking at squirrels in the backyard, David singing off-key while cleaning the kitchen, the little arguments over who left the toothpaste cap off again. She missed being needed. It was a Tuesday afternoon when her neighbor, Linda, stopped by. She brought banana bread, the kind David used to love, and sat on the porch with Sarah, talking about anything but the things that really mattered. Until gently. Linda said, "You know, there's a shelter not far from here. My niece volunteers there. Says they've got a lot of dogs who need someone." Sarah just looked at her. "I'm not ready," she whispered. Linda nodded. "You don't have to be. Sometimes healing starts with not being ready." Sarah didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She just tucked the thought away, like a folded letter in a drawer. That night, she couldn't sleep. Again. She turned over in bed and stared at the spot where David used to lie, and the silence stared back. The next morning, Sarah woke up early. She got dressed without thinking too much about it. Jeans, old sneakers, a sweater that used to belong to David. She didn't do her hair, didn't wear makeup. She didn't know why, but her hands were moving. Her car keys were in her hand. Her feet were on the gas pedal. It wasn't until she pulled into the gravel parking lot that she realized where she was. The shelter was small, quiet. No barking, just a dull hum behind the walls. She sat in the car for 10 minutes, maybe more, staring at the door, wondering if she should turn around. But something inside her whispered, "Go in." So she did. A young woman at the front desk greeted her kindly. No questions, no pressure. Just a gentle smile and a quiet, "Take your time." Sarah walked past rows of kennels. Some dogs barked, some whined, most of them looked up, hoping she'd be the one. But Sarah kept walking. She wasn't looking for a dog. She didn't even know why she was there. Then she saw him, a dog sitting in the back corner of a kennel, not barking, not jumping, just watching. He had soft, dark eyes, the kind that don't ask for anything, just understand. Their eyes met, and something shifted inside her. She didn't move for a moment. Neither did he. It was like they were both waiting for the other to say something. Then, slowly, he stood up, walked to the front of the kennel, and sat, still silent. Sarah's heart started to beat a little faster. Not in fear, not in excitement, just alive. For the first time in months, she felt something. She knelt down and whispered, "Hey, buddy." The dog didn't wag his tail. He didn't lick her hand. He just looked at her, with eyes that seemed to say, "I know you." She read the tag. Murphy. She didn't ask for his age. Didn't care what breed he was. She just looked up at the staff member and asked, "Can I sit with him for a while?" They opened the gate. Murphy stepped out, walked up to her, and gently leaned his head into her chest. Sarah froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She felt warmth spread through her ribcage. It wasn't like Max. It wasn't even like David. It was something else, a mix of peace and ache, a feeling she couldn't name, but didn't want to let go of. She sat with him on the cold floor. Minutes passed, and then, quietly, she whispered, "I think I've been waiting for you." Murphy didn't move. He just stayed, head on her lap, and for the first time since the funeral, Sarah cried. But this time, they weren't the tears of a woman breaking apart. They were the tears of someone starting, just barely, to come back to life. She didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if she was making a mistake. But she filled out the papers, took the leash, and walked out of the shelter with a dog who didn't know her name. But somehow, already knew her heart. She didn't know it yet. But she hadn't just adopted a dog. She had found a piece of something she thought she lost forever. And that was just the beginning. Sarah didn't expect to feel anything. Not really. She walked into that shelter thinking she was just going to look. Maybe sit with a dog or two. Feel a little better. Then leave. She told herself this wasn't about replacing anything. She passed dozens of dogs, big ones, small ones. Some barked loudly, jumping up against the gate. Some cried the moment she got close. Others paced back and forth, restless and anxious. She paused a few times, but nothing clicked. Then she turned the last corner, and there he was, a dog sitting perfectly still in the far corner of his kennel. He didn't bark, didn't move, didn't beg for attention. He just looked at her. It stopped her mid-step. He was medium-sized, maybe a mix of breeds. His coat was soft brown, with patches of gray around the muzzle. His ears drooped slightly, like they were too heavy for his head. But it was his eyes that froze her. Tired, soulful eyes, like he'd seen too much, felt too much, and somehow still had something left to give. Their eyes locked, and Sarah felt a strange pull in her chest. It wasn't shock. It wasn't fear. It was more like something old, something familiar, recognition, or maybe memory. She shook her head and looked away. It didn't make sense. She kept walking past the kennel, pretending to scan the rest of the row. But her feet didn't move far. Her heart stayed behind. She turned back. The dog hadn't moved, still watching her. Not sad, not hopeful. Just present, as if he already knew her story. The tag on the kennel read, Murphy. She said the name under her breath, and a lump formed in her throat. David had a cousin named Murphy. They used to joke that if they ever got another dog, that's what they'd name him. Good, solid name, David had said, like someone who shows up on time and never forgets your birthday. They had laughed for hours about it. It was nothing, just a name. And yet, here it was. Murphy. Something inside her stirred, a mix of sorrow, comfort, and something harder to name, like being seen. She crouched down near the kennel. He stood up slowly, not stiff, not sore, just careful, like someone who knew not to rush these things. He stepped forward, not wagging, not begging. He simply pressed his head against the metal bars. Sarah didn't reach out. She just knelt there, quietly, and let the silence speak. A shelter worker came by. Murphy's calm, she said softly. He doesn't open up to everyone. But when he chooses someone, it's gentle, like he's always known them. Sarah didn't answer, because she wasn't sure what she was feeling. Her hands trembled, her mouth was dry. This was impossible. But her heart said, stay. Minutes passed. Finally, she whispered, Can I meet him? The staff opened the gate. Murphy stepped out. No hesitation, no sniffing. He walked up to Sarah and sat right beside her. Not on her, not pushing against her. Just there. She looked down. His eyes met hers again, and something, soft and unspoken, moved between them. It wasn't like with Max, and it wasn't like David. It was its own kind of quiet magic. A shelter worker handed her the leash. You don't have to decide now, she said gently. You can take a day or two, but Sarah already knew. Somehow, this didn't feel like a choice. It felt like something that had been waiting for her. Like this moment had always been there, just waiting for the day she walked into that shelter. She filled out the forms, signed her name. The pen shook in her hand, not from fear, but from the weight of what this meant. She was letting someone in again. That was the scariest part. The car ride home was quiet. Murphy didn't bark, didn't whine. He just sat in the back seat, watching the world go by. Sarah glanced at him in the rearview mirror. He was calm, steady, like he belonged there. The closer they got to her house, the more her chest tightened. She didn't know if this was right, didn't know if she was ready. But when she opened the car door, Murphy stepped out slowly and stood beside her like he'd done it 1,000 times before. No tugging, no rushing, just waiting. She led him through the front door. For a second, she almost said, "Welcome home," but the words caught in her throat. She set down the leash and took a deep breath. Murphy wandered through the house slowly. He sniffed the rug, the couch, the empty dog bed in the corner, paused near the photo shelf. He sat under the framed picture of David and Max at the lake, just sat and looked up. Sarah stared. Her hand went to her chest. How could he know? She didn't speak, didn't move. He looked at the picture, then back at her, and in his eyes she saw something that made her knees weak. Not sadness, not confusion, just knowing. That night, she got ready for bed. It felt strange, brushing her teeth with someone else in the house. She kept glancing at the door, expecting David to walk in and make some joke about her messy bun. Instead, Murphy padded down the hallway and stopped at the bedroom door. She paused. "Come on," she whispered. "If you want." Murphy didn't hesitate. He walked straight to her side of the bed and curled up in the exact spot David used to lie in. She froze. Her hand went to her mouth. It wasn't just close. It was exact. The same angle. The same quiet breathing. The same soft presence at her side. She sat on the edge of the bed and felt her chest swell. Grief didn't disappear. It sat beside her. But now, there was something else. A warmth. A pulse. A presence she hadn't felt in months. Murphy looked up at her. Not with need, not with confusion, just gentle awareness. Like he knew this was the spot where healing had to begin, and he was ready to keep. Watch until she found her way. Sarah lay down beside him. Her hand brushed his fur, and for the first time in a long time, she slept. Not dreamless, but peaceful, as if someone, somewhere, had whispered, "You're not alone anymore." The first time it happened, Sarah thought she imagined it. It was early morning. The sun wasn't even up yet. She had woken from a dream. One of those dreams, the kind that leaves you breathless. In the dream, she was back at the lake with David. He was laughing, reaching for her hand, but as she reached back, he faded. Gone. Just like that. She woke up shaking. Her hands clutched the bedsheet. Her heart raced. The room felt too quiet, too real. The ache rolled in, sharp and fast. Her chest tightened. And just like before, back when David was still alive, she felt the panic start to rise. That crushing wave of sadness, heavy and full. She curled up on her side, trying to ride it out. And then, a nudge. Soft. Gentle. Murphy pressed his nose into her hand. Not her shoulder. Not her back. Her hand. Right where David used to touch her when she panicked. Back then, David wouldn't speak right away. He would just touch her hand. Let her feel he was there. Then say something like, "Just breathe. I've got you." Murphy didn't say anything. Of course he didn't. But his touch felt like a whisper. "I'm here." Sarah blinked through tears. Murphy looked up at her, calm and steady. No whining. No tail wagging. Just present. She tried to brush it off. Just a sweet dog, smart, sensitive. Maybe he could sense her breathing change. Coincidence? But the next sign didn't feel so easy to explain. It was 2 days later. She was cleaning the bedroom, trying to put away old clothes. She had left the closet door open for a few minutes while sorting sweaters into boxes. Murphy wasn't in the room, or so she thought. When she turned around, she froze. There he was, standing at the closet entrance. In his mouth, David's old slipper, the one he used to wear every morning, the one Sarah hadn't touched in months. She'd tucked it way back in the closet, behind boots, under a winter coat. Murphy had never seen it, never had reason to, but somehow he had found it and brought it to her. He walked over slowly, laid the slipper at her feet, then sat down. No chewing, no playing, just offering. Sarah dropped to her knees. She picked up the slipper and held it to her chest. It still smelled faintly like David, that mix of soap, old books, and the outdoors. Her eyes stung, her throat closed. Murphy leaned forward and rested his chin on her knee, like he knew, like he remembered. She whispered, "How did you know?" Murphy didn't blink, didn't move. He just looked at her with those soft, tired eyes. Later that week, she sat on the back porch, sipping tea. The air was cold, her sweater wasn't enough, but she didn't go inside. It was quiet. Still, Murphy lay at her feet, half asleep. And then, without thinking, she whispered something. "Hey, Bear." She didn't mean to say it. It just slipped out. That was the nickname, the one only she used for David. Bear, because he was big and warm and always wrapped her in those long, safe hugs. No one else knew it. She hadn't said it aloud since the funeral. But the moment she said it, Murphy lifted his head. His ears perked. His eyes opened wide. He looked directly at her, not confused, not curious. Alert, like he recognized it. "Hey, Bear," she said again, this time softer. Murphy stood up and stepped closer, then sat in front of her. Not wagging, not playful, still, focused. Sarah felt her whole body go still. This wasn't nothing. This wasn't random. She reached out and touched his head. Murphy closed his eyes and leaned into her hand, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the tiniest spark of something impossible. Was it possible? No, it couldn't be. But the signs were piling up. She tried to push it down, tell herself she was just grieving, just imagining things. But her heart wasn't so sure. That night, she was sitting on the floor by the bookshelf. She had been sorting through old photos, weddings, vacations, silly snapshots of her and David laughing in the kitchen, photos of Max, their old golden retriever, curled up in his lap. She smiled, then cried, then smiled again. It hurt, but it also helped. Murphy wandered over and sat beside her. She looked at him, still caught between memory and the moment. Then her hand brushed against the small wooden dish on the shelf. Inside it, her wedding ring. She hadn't worn it in weeks, not because she stopped loving David, but because it hurt too much to feel its weight, to touch it, and not feel his hand in hers. She lifted the ring and stared at it. The room felt heavy with silence, and then a quiet sound. A low, soft whine. Murphy. She turned to look at him. He was staring at the ring, not just glancing, staring. His ears dropped slightly. His tail didn't move. He let out another soft sound, almost like a sigh, almost like sadness. Sarah felt something inside her crack open. She dropped the ring into her palm, and suddenly, she couldn't hold it in anymore. The sob broke loose like a wave, big, ugly, raw. She covered her face and crumbled to the floor. The grief she had held so tightly, the quiet pain behind her eyes, it all came rushing out. She cried for the birthdays they would never have, for the kids they never got to raise, for the mornings she still woke up reaching for him. She cried for the slipper, for the nickname, for the quiet eyes that had seen too much. And through it all, Murphy stayed. He didn't bark, didn't lick her face. He simply stepped closer and gently laid his head in her lap. Not on her knees, not across her legs, in her lap. Exactly where David used to rest his head on lazy Sunday mornings. Sarah froze, tears still streaming. She looked down at him. His eyes were closed, his body still. But his presence filled the room. And in that moment, she didn't feel alone. She didn't know how to explain it. Didn't know if anyone would believe it. But she knew what her heart felt. This wasn't just comfort. This wasn't just a dog being sweet. It was deeper, more sacred, like David had left behind something just for her. A piece of love, wrapped in fur, brought to her in a moment when she needed it most. She held Murphy's head gently in her hands. "Thank you," she whispered. She didn't know if she was speaking to the dog or to the love she thought she lost, but she said it anyway. And for the first time since David's death, she felt the ache shift, not vanish, but soften. Like maybe healing didn't mean forgetting. Maybe it meant letting someone new carry part of the weight. Someone who understood, without ever needing to speak. The next morning felt different. Not easier. Not painless. Just different. The kind of morning where the air feels a little lighter. Where the silence doesn't press so hard on your chest. Where the ache is still there, but it doesn't crush you. Sarah opened her eyes slowly. Murphy was already awake, lying at the foot of the bed, watching her. His tail thumped once. She smiled. A real, small smile. "Morning, Bear," she whispered. Murphy stretched, stood up, and walked over to nuzzle her cheek, like he understood, like this was their routine now. And maybe it was. It didn't happen overnight. There were still bad days, days when the grief came back hard and fast, when Sarah would break down folding laundry or hear a song that stabbed at old wounds. But Murphy was there for every one of them. When she cried, he laid beside her. When she laughed at an old memory, he tilted his head, as if curious. When she talked to David out loud, Murphy listened, like it all made perfect sense. One afternoon, Sarah pulled out a box of David's things. She hadn't touched it in months. Inside were photos, letters, birthday cards, even the dog-eared copy of The Art of Racing in the Rain, a book David loved and cried through. She sat on the floor, surrounded by pieces of the man she had loved for half her life. Murphy came and laid next to her, his chin on her thigh. She read old notes out loud, laughed at David's terrible drawings in the margins. "Look at this, Murphy," she chuckled softly, holding up a faded napkin where David had doodled a dog wearing sunglasses. "He made this at our first diner date, called it Cool Max after our old Golden." Murphy sniffed the napkin gently. then licked her hand. Sarah paused. Something about it made her throat tighten. The way he responded to David's name. The way he acted like he knew. She shook her head and smiled through the sting. Maybe you really do have a little piece of him in you, huh? Murphy wagged his tail once. Just once. Slow and calm. Weeks passed. The house no longer felt like a tomb. Sarah started cooking again. Actual meals, not just frozen dinners. She began leaving the bedroom window open, letting in the breeze David always loved, and most surprising of all, she started walking, not just around the block. Long walks, through parks, along trails they used to hike together. Murphy walked at her side without pulling. He never ran ahead. Never lagged behind. He stayed right beside her, like David always did. One evening, as the sun began to fall behind the trees, Sarah sat on a bench by the lake. Murphy sat at her feet. They watched ducks swim by, the water glowing gold and pink. Sarah closed her eyes, breathed deep. "I used to come here with him," she whispered. Murphy leaned against her leg. He'd always say the lake looked like melted copper this time of day. She laughed softly. "I never saw it, until now." She looked down at Murphy. He looked up, eyes calm, full of something she couldn't name. Gratitude? Memory? Love? All of it. Maybe. As days turned to weeks, and weeks to months, people began to notice. At the grocery store, a kind woman commented, "You look lighter, happier." Sarah just smiled and said, "It's the dog." At church, an old friend hugged her. "I've missed that glow in your eyes," she squeezed back. "I think I was just waiting for the right reason to wake up again." Murphy was always there, quiet, steady, present. One Saturday, Sarah decided to visit David's parents. It had been too long. She had avoided it because every visit reminded her of everything she'd lost. But now, with Murphy by her side, she felt stronger. The moment she stepped inside, David's mother gasped, "Oh my!" Murphy walked in calmly, sat in the living room like he'd been there 1,000 times. David's father knelt down and looked into Murphy's eyes. "This dog," he whispered. "There's something in him, something familiar." Sarah nodded. "I feel it too." They sat around the table, sipping tea, talking about the past, about David. Murphy laid by Sarah's feet the whole time. When David's mother began crying, Murphy rose, walked to her, and gently rested his head on her lap. She sobbed, harder, held his face, whispered, "Thank you." Sarah watched, stunned. Murphy had never met these people, but somehow he knew they mattered. That night, back at home, Sarah sat in the armchair. Murphy curled up on the rug beside her. She stared out the window, the sky dark and quiet. She thought about all the moments that led her here, the empty days, the deep ache. Oh, silence. And now, this strange, beautiful bond. She didn't know what to call it. A miracle? A second chance? A soul remembering love? All she knew was this. She wasn't broken anymore. Not whole. Not the same, but not broken. And that mattered. One morning, she woke with an idea. A small, brave idea. She opened her old laptop, typed out a message, thinking of starting a blog, just to share some stories. Maybe someone out there needs to know. They're not alone. She paused, then added, "It's called The Quiet After, named after what comes when the world goes still. and something new finds its way in. She smiled. Murphy barked once from the kitchen. She turned and laughed. Okay, okay. Breakfast first. She walked into the kitchen, poured his food, and sat beside him while he ate. Then she whispered, "You saved me, didn't you?" He looked. Up, muzzle full, tail wagging. She stroked his back. Or maybe he did. Through you. Murphy leaned into her hand. Later that evening, she lit a candle on the back porch. Something David used to do on cool nights. She sat with Murphy, blanket around her shoulders. The stars blinked softly above. The breeze whispered through the trees. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the wedding ring, held it in her palm. She didn't cry this time. Instead, she looked at Murphy. Wherever he is, I hope he knows I'm okay. Murphy wagged his tail. Sarah smiled. Soft. Peaceful. You can stay as long as you want, Bear. Murphy licked her hand once and stayed. Love changes. That's something Sarah never believed before. To her, love had always meant one thing. David. His smile. His voice. His hand brushing hers on long drives. The quiet way he listened when she couldn't find the right words. The way he made the house feel full even on rainy days. When she lost him, she thought love was gone too, that it had packed its bags and followed him into the silence. But now, sitting on the porch in the early spring breeze, watching Murphy chase leaves across the yard, Sarah knew something else. Love doesn't leave. It shifts. It changes shape. Sometimes it comes back in ways we don't expect. Sometimes it wears fur. The days grew longer. The chill faded. Sarah found herself laughing again. Really laughing. Not the polite kind. Not the, "I'm okay, don't worry about me" kind. The kind that made her eyes close and her shoulders shake. It started small. Murphy sneezed mid-yawn and scared himself so badly he fell off the couch. Sarah burst out laughing, almost startled herself. It had been months since that sound came out of her. Murphy got up, shook off, and gave her a look like, "You didn't have to laugh that hard," which made her laugh even more. She began writing, not just a blog anymore. She started a journal too. In it, she wrote letters to David, and also to Murphy. She wrote about small victories, making soup without crying, watching a movie all the way through, planting tulips in the backyard again. She wrote about her feelings, how strange it was to love a dog so deeply, and how guilty she sometimes felt for smiling when David wasn't here to see it. But she also wrote this: "I don't think you'd want me to be stuck, David. I think you'd want me to be warm, brave, and loved." Murphy does that. He reminds me what love still feels like. Not the same, but real, and gentle, and somehow enough. Spring turned to summer. Sarah's house no longer looked like a museum of grief. She changed the curtains, put up new photos. Some of David, yes, but also ones of Murphy. She got new couch cushions, painted the kitchen a soft blue David had always liked but never gotten around to trying. She began hosting again. Just small things. Coffee with neighbors, tea with old friends. They all noticed. "You seem different," they'd say, and she was. Not someone new, but someone returning. Someone softer, stronger. Open. One afternoon, Sarah and Murphy walked past a small park they'd never noticed before. A group of kids were playing fetch with a Labrador. Murphy perked. "Up! He pulled at the leash, something he almost never did. Sarah laughed. You want to join them? She unclipped the leash. Murphy bolted. He didn't bark. He didn't jump. He just ran straight to the kids, sat politely, and waited. A little boy tossed the ball. Murphy chased it like he'd done it 1,000 times. The kids laughed and clapped. One little girl ran up to Sarah. Is he yours? Sarah smiled. Yeah, she said. He's mine. But as she said it, she realized something else. I'm his too. Later that night, Sarah sat on the couch with Murphy's head in her lap. She scratched behind his ears and whispered, You brought me back. Murphy blinked up at her. You didn't. Fix me. I didn't need fixing. She paused. You reminded me I wasn't done yet. That summer, Sarah took Murphy on a trip. Not far, just a quiet cabin up north where she and David used to go. She had avoided it for a long time, afraid it would be too much. But now, she felt ready. She packed David's book, Murphy's leash, a journal, and a sweater for cool nights. The drive was quiet, peaceful. When they arrived, Sarah stepped onto the porch and just stood there. The cabin looked the same creaky step, same scent of pine. Murphy sniffed around like he'd been there before. Inside, she lit a fire, made tea, sat in the armchair where David used to read. Murphy curled up at her feet. She opened the journal, wrote one sentence. I think you'd like who I'm becoming. The next morning, she took Murphy for a walk down by the lake, the same trail she and David used to hike. As they walked, Sarah talked out loud. She told Murphy about old memories, about the time David fell into the lake trying to catch a frog, about the time they saw a baby deer and stayed completely still so they wouldn't scare it. Murphy didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, the love in her voice, the peace. At the end of the trail, they sat by the water. Sarah pulled out a stone she had brought from home. It was flat and smooth. On it, she had written in marker, still loved, still remembered, always with me. She placed it on the edge of the lake, took a deep breath, and let go. Not of David, but of the guilt. The feeling that moving forward meant leaving him behind. Because now, she understood, love doesn't stay in the past. It grows with us. That evening, she and Murphy sat by the fireplace. She looked down at him. Hey, Bear, she whispered. His ears perked. You ready to go home tomorrow? He yawned and laid his head on her feet. Sarah smiled. Home feels different now, she said. But maybe that's okay. In the weeks that followed, Sarah started volunteering at the same shelter where she had found Murphy. She helped walk the dogs, talked to people coming in, looking for a sign. Sometimes she told them her story. Sometimes she just listened. One day, a young woman came in, eyes puffy from crying. Sarah sat with her, told her gently, I came here once, broken, lost. The woman looked up. Did it help? Sarah nodded. It didn't bring back what I lost, but it helped me find what I still had left to love. Every night, Sarah writes in her journal. She ends each entry the same way. Love didn't leave me. It changed. And I chose to follow it. Murphy lays beside her, breathing slow and deep. She strokes his fur and feels it again. That strange, quiet knowing. That maybe some part of David is still here. Not in some magical fairy tale way, but in the way love lingers. The way it finds its way back. Through memory. Through kindness. Through a dog with tired eyes and a gentle soul. Sarah still misses David. She always will. But she's no longer afraid of the quiet. Because now, in that stillness, she hears more than loss. She hears the sound of Murphy's soft breathing, the wind in the trees, the thump of a tail that means, I'm here. And somehow, that's enough. A new kind of love. Not louder, not bigger, but real. And this time, she's ready to receive it. It was a quiet night. No traffic. No phone ringing. No noise at all. Just the soft hum of life moving slowly. Sarah stood in the kitchen, her hands still warm from a mug of tea. She looked over to the living room and stopped. Murphy was sitting by the window, completely still. His eyes were turned toward the night sky, not barking, not shifting, just watching. The stars above blinked gently, scattered across the black. Sarah walked over. Kneeling beside him, she followed his gaze. Sky felt bigger than usual, peaceful, endless, and somehow close. She reached out and rested her hand on his back. Murphy didn't flinch, didn't move. He just leaned into her touch. They sat like that for a long time. No words, no explanations, only a shared quiet. Finally, she whispered, I know it's you. Murphy turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers. Soft, old, familiar. I know you never left me, she said. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. This one didn't hurt. It felt gentle, like a memory resting on her skin. Murphy let out a slow breath, warm and steady. Then he placed his head in her lap, and Sarah smiled, for the first time, without pain pulling at the corners, without guilt sitting in her chest. Just a real, full smile. In that moment, something shifted. Not just in the room, not just in her heart, but in the space between what was and what is. The past no longer felt like a weight. It felt like a foundation. Still there, still strong, but no longer holding her down, just holding her up. Voice gentle, she spoke into the quiet. Thank you for finding your way back to me. Later that night, she sat in bed, journal in her lap, pen ready. She didn't write a long entry, just a few words. Love doesn't die. It waits. And if we're lucky, it finds its way home. As she turned off the light, Murphy circled once and laid down at the foot of the bed, just like David used to. She looked at him, at those steady eyes, that familiar calm, and felt something she hadn't in a very long time. Whole. Sometimes, love comes back in unexpected forms. Sometimes it walks on four legs, with eyes that remember, and a heart that never stopped loving you. Sarah didn't replace David. She couldn't, and she didn't want to. Murphy wasn't a ghost. He wasn't magic, but he was something rare. A bridge, a whisper, a reminder that the kind of love they shared, it wasn't gone. It had simply taken a different shape. Now, Sarah wakes up and greets the day. She talks to David sometimes and cuddles Murphy every night. She lives. She laughs. She breathes. And every now and then, when she sees Murphy watching the stars again, she kneels beside him. She places her hand on his back, and she says the same thing every time. I see you. I remember. And I'm okay now. She lost her husband, but she found something amazing. Not a replacement. Not a memory frozen in time, but a living, breathing reminder. That real Love never truly leaves us. It just waits until we're ready to feel it again. Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.